What up, Crypto Squad? This is BlocKade, joined by Josh Igoe today. And today on our current events episode, we are going to be talking about Japan, crypto banking, Iran and crypto mining, crypto in China, and smart cities. You are now orbiting the dark side of the HODL Moon. HODL Moon!
And this week, we are going to talk about the recent news, the emerging news from around the world in cryptocurrency and blockchain. My name's Josh Igoe.
And I'm BlocKade, aka Professor HODL.
And this week, we are going to have a kind of a roundup of the interesting stories around the world. So, one of the stories that I really like, Kade, is the U.S. congressman basically admitting that they are powerless to stop the BTC train. What do you think about this? It was in the aftermath of the Trump tweet. So Trump said that he wasn't a fan of cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin, and then we've had a lot of the news around the Facebook Libra coin, and so now Congress is having like hearings and stuff like that. And one of the congressmen, his name is Congressman Patrick McHenry, and he represents North Carolina's 10th district. He said, "Look, we can't stop. We can't stop Bitcoin. It's a futile effort." What do you think? I think it's obviously a truthful observation, but what do you think about the implications for this, Kate?
Yeah, well, it's nice that it's finally hitting the mainstream. I think for those of us in the crypto space, this is kind of old news that Bitcoin's an unstoppable force, minus, the whole planet getting hit by an asteroid like we mentioned in a previous episode. But yeah, I mean, you can not like something, but that doesn't mean you can stop it. 10 countries have banned cryptocurrency, and all 10 of those countries haven't stopped cryptocurrency. So liking something and wanting to ban it or disliking it are completely unrelated topics.
Yeah, that's true. And also, it's kind of like a lot of these people are out of touch as well, the old congressmen and people in the Senate and the House also. They might not really understand the technology fully, and they think they can just ban it. I mean, have you ever seen any of the videos when they interview people at Google, for example, and they ask, "Does Google know where I am in this room?" And the Google CEO is just like, "Well, you can either opt in or opt out of that service. It's up to you." And the same thing with Facebook as well. If you've seen the Facebook hearings from last year, in fact, about privacy, some of the questions that the congressmen were coming up with were just highlighted how out of touch they were in terms of technology. So perhaps they naively believe that they can do something to prevent Bitcoin. But this particular guy, he's actually realized the obvious, and that is it's an unstoppable force. Like we mentioned last week in our predictions episode, what would happen if there was like a local catastrophe or something like that, like a catastrophic event? Well, for Bitcoin, nothing would happen. It doesn't really matter as long as some nodes are running somewhere. I mean, the network continues, right? So that's pretty cool. So let's talk about this in relation to how the US is going to handle it, but also some of the other countries around the world. They've got their own news. And we could talk about China and how they've recently made some changes to the way that Bitcoin is being perceived. Mm-hmm. And also Iran. Iran has made some headlines. So let's look at some of the stories, and you can choose the next topic. Which one do you want to go for next, Kate?
Yeah. I think we're definitely going to have to cover those in this episode. But first, I want to talk about Japan. And actually, it's related to a tweet that I saw earlier this week. And Rhythm Trader on Twitter, I just want to quote his tweet. "Why is the President and Secretary of Treasury against Bitcoin? Accountability. But banks help launder over $2 trillion every year. That's 10 times more money than the entire Bitcoin network is worth. Why are they so critical of Bitcoin? A public ledger would mean their worst nightmare." And I actually retweeted that. And my comment was exactly the pseudo-anonymity of crypto and the blockchain would expose them. So actually, having a blockchain would in some ways diminish money laundering, because if the banks had to do everything on a public immutable ledger, they couldn't cook the books and do those kind of things. So what do you think about that?
Actually, that's a really good point. And it's really funny that a lot of people often say, cryptocurrencies are used for, nefarious things. And in reality, actually, the US dollar is used more than any other thing. And that doesn't mean that the US dollar is inherently terrible, right? For these, for terrorism, or if it's for organized crime, US dollar is still the number one currency in circulation for that. And the banks always get massive fines every single month. There's a new case where a bank somewhere has been caught basically either laundering money for criminals or, breaking international trade rules or even breaking their own rules and then having to be fined through the legal system. And they end up paying billions of dollars a year in these fines, and they just treat it as a business expense. So I think that you're right. It would definitely diminish their ability to do these types of things, because a public ledger would basically be out there and people would be looking and they'd be able to check more easily. I think that it's a really good point. It's fascinating, actually. So yeah, it's a good point. It's something that they are afraid of. But it shows the power of cryptocurrency. It's going to bring the world into the world of accountability.
Yeah, and I'm not exactly sure what I think of this, but this kind of relates to that what Japan's trying to do. So they want to kind of replace SWIFT with a SWIFT-like cryptocurrency payment system, but it says it could take a few years to develop. What I'm just not clear about is why they want to copy SWIFT but put it on the blockchain. Why is that? To prevent money laundering, so they can still be in control? What's the point of creating a SWIFT copy on the blockchain instead of just using cryptocurrency peer-to-peer?
I think that you hit the nail on the head when you use the word control. I think that is still at the heart of a lot of this apprehension that many banks and governments have about cryptocurrency in general. Is this complete permissionless system? Anyone can join, anybody can participate, and it can't be manipulated by a single authority. I think that worries people. But actually, I think it's good for consumers in general overall, though, cryptocurrency being a hot topic, because what I've seen is a lot of innovation from existing financial companies and new financial companies. You've seen a lot more mobile banking coming in, especially in the UK. I don't know how popular it is in the United States right now, but there are a bunch of really cool and interesting, like internet-based, app-based banks, which are really easy to use and actually quite competitive in terms of rates. And I don't think that they would really have had a chance without this, let's say, paradigm shift that cryptocurrency has brought. So if you think about banks like Revolut, Monzo, N26 or N26, I don't know how you would say that, and Starling Bank, and also TransferWise with their borderless account. These banks are awesome. I mean, I use TransferWise for my business account. I've opened accounts at Monzo and Revolut before to check them out. I ultimately decided to go with TransferWise. But these banks are essentially trying to compete with the speed and efficiency of cryptocurrencies, but also give the security of like having a bank account, having some kind of customer support. And their emphasis is on mobility, the ability for you to travel around and run a business from anywhere, which is one of the big appeals of cryptocurrency, really. And then I also noticed that PayPal launched its own remittance service recently called Zoom, but with an X, so XOOM. That's a PayPal company, and they are going to compete directly with Ripple. So that's pretty good. So all this competition is awesome. Like, I'm a free market guy. I like competition. I think that competition is beneficial for the world, and I think it's going to be good for everyone in the long term to have at least this. How would I describe it? Like this ominous force in the background, which is Bitcoin, that is driving everyone to basically provide better financial services to people. So that's pretty cool. That was a bit of a ramble, though, Kate. So what do you think about what I just said there? There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, I'm in the US, so I'm following trying to follow the regulations and using the traditional banks. But yeah, I think it's gonna be really great for the rest of the world. And like you said, competition is great. I remember, and I'm sure you remember some of the first uh hardware wallets and mobile wallets and desktop wallets, and they've just gotten so much better in only 2 or 3 years. So I think of course, I think cryptocurrency is going to revolutionize banking, but I don't know much about those projects, so I'm just going to have to take your word for it. But do you want to jump to Iran?
Yeah, but before we do, just so you know about these projects like Revolut, Monzo, N26, they're basically um, either parts of existing banks that they've set up like a smaller subsidiary to appeal to like millennials and younger people and digital nomads, or they're trying to enter the banking space and be disruptive. They're doing like traditional seed funding rounds. So like actually N26 is on a Series D right now, and they actually secured another $160 million investment. Um, so these types of banks, they are not obviously cryptocurrencies. However, they do allow you to accept cryptocurrency. This is why it's pretty cool. Like Revolut, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you can have cryptocurrency account even within your own bank, and it's like a registered bank in the United Kingdom. So that's pretty cool. So you can accept Ethereum and Bitcoin, and I think the top 5 major currencies um, to your business bank account address, which is pretty cool. It means they're quite progressive and that they are, accepting that it's going to be a part of the financial paradigm going forward. So
Yeah, I have
just to
some.
wrap that up, anyway, yeah.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that's interesting because I think, especially me originally, I thought there was banks, that's one separate thing, crypto, that's another separate thing. But now we kind of see that integration where crypto and these new progressive innovative banks are kind of combining those two things. I always like having the private Swiss bank account in your pocket on your phone, but I definitely think having crypto friendly banks is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And if you look at things like crypto.com and that used to be called Monaco, if you remember Monaco card, they bought the domain crypto.com probably for quite a large amount of money um, a few years ago. And now they're focused on building crypto.com. Now that's pretty cool because anywhere that Visa is accepted, you can basically spend your digital assets. Now they obviously do a transfer on the spot, and then you actually are spending US dollars in reality. But it's cool to at least have that kind of ability to spend your
Yeah,
blockchain
I know a
product.
couple people at my local
Mm.
meetup that have the crypto.com card, and apparently you get some 5% cash back or crypto back. So I'm actually looking to getting one of those cards myself for places that don't accept crypto right off the
Yeah,
bat.
and they are doing some quite innovative promotions. I mean, they're not they're not partnered with Netflix and Spotify directly, but they know how popular these apps are for especially like our generation of people. So if you use your my crypto card to pay for Netflix subscription and also your Spotify subscription, they will refund it. So basically it's free if you use crypto.com. You get free Netflix, free Spotify. That's pretty cool.
Nice.
And
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
you
think
also
it's
get, oh yeah, sorry man. You also get
yeah.
10% off on Airbnb, which is cool, but they just refund the difference. It's not a partnership with Airbnb, but this is like crypto's marketing campaign to get young people using their Visa card thing, which is cool.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of if these new crypto banks are going to disrupt the legacy banking system. I think it's just a matter of when. I think me and you might have to tell our brothers to start looking for another job or get one with a crypto friendly bank because they're going to be out of business.
Well, he's Yeah, my brother's in the UK right now. I'm in the UK right now. I've come for a vacation. He's here as well. I was speaking to him about crypto stuff. He's going to move to Singapore next year, and Singapore is actually a hotbed for cryptocurrency stuff. So that's going to be pretty interesting because he's going to get more involved in the actual projects. Now, many projects are also in Switzerland. That's where he's based. But I think it's a lot more active in Singapore from what I've seen. I think Switzerland is kind of more of a treasury custodial type of a place. Like your crypto assets will be saved there. But I think Singapore is where a lot of the action is. I've been to several events in Singapore, and there's a lot of interest, and there's a lot more of the execution and the campaign side rather than the custodial side.
Yeah, definitely. Switzerland's a nice place to store your gold, though. They're known for storing physical gold in safes. Josh, you got any gold, any crypto safes in Switzerland?
Well, if I did, I wouldn't declare it here.
That's smart, Josh. Don't share that information. Don't share your private keys.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, so that's cool. Let's talk about the Iran thing then. So you
Yeah.
mentioned this. Let's go into that topic now.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be my turn to ramble here because it's pretty interesting because um, Iran's being cracked down by U.S. sanctions. They've been cut off from SWIFT and other banking systems, but also their behavior is a little strange. So, if I was them, I would be mining crypto like crazy. But there's also interesting thing happening. There used to be a lot of miners, and Iran seems to be wanting to limit cryptocurrency mining. An interesting thing is Iranians pay as low as 6 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a lot cheaper than the 20 cents per kilowatt hour or even more in Europe that most people pay. So, and they're also banning the importation of mining equipment, it seems like. So it's a little strange that they're doing these things when at the same time it seems like mining Bitcoin would be in their best interest. But another interesting thing I saw is that they're actually mining crypto in the mosques because mosques get free electricity, 0 cents per kilowatt hour. So they're they're doing that, and then there's issues about whether mining crypto or crypto is allowed in the Islamic tradition or the Islamic faith. So there's all kinds of interesting things happening with Iran and crypto right now.
Yeah, actually, it's funny you mentioned the last part about the Islamic banking system because in that part, well, in that region, and for many Islamic countries, interest is like it's against their religion. You can't charge interest on loans, so that's kind of flies in the face of what a Western banking system actually requires. Like our money is built on debt. You need to actually have a debt-based system, and people need to be paying interest to keep the money flowing around. But in the Islamic banking world, like interest is haram, which means it's forbidden. So that's quite interesting. One of the things that I was looking into recently, because I'm a course junkie, I always like taking more educational courses. I've always got a course on the go somewhere. Now, one of the courses that I was looking at is actually Islamic banking and finance for the very reason that in the Middle East, they're starting to get really interested in cryptocurrency. They want to be positioned well in the future for a financial hub of the world. And if they can position themselves well now before all the oil runs out, and then they can transition into like being a crypto hub in the future, I think that it would be pretty useful to understand the Islamic banking and finance laws to a good degree. So I've checked out some courses. They cost a few $1,000s, so I'm not 100% sure that I will take them or not. But that is something that I'm looking into next, because if the Middle East hots up for crypto, then there's a good potential for lots of business opportunities there. And I'm a keen business guy. If I can make some entrepreneurial moves in the Middle East, I'll be down for doing it. So that's one thing about the Iran thing that's interesting, is how the Islamic faith deals with interest.
Mhm.
Anyway, So
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I've heard
Actually,
that.
yeah. Actually, while you're talking, I looked up something and it said actually it's kind of a debate on whether it's allowed or not. So it says this was some of our top clerics have issued fatwas that say Bitcoin is money without a reserve that is rejected by Islamic law and cyber currencies are haram, like you said. Yeah, and I think it's really strange though because that you think if you're being cut out of Swift, you think like this would be the best thing to do. You think that the government would set up mining farms. Yeah, and they're thinking Bitcoin's taking advantage of the cheap electricity. Well, what if the government sets up a mining farm? They'd have so much Bitcoin, and they could, possibly circumvent Swift. And I think, they're trying to solve a problem, but with the wrong solution because I still think the Iranian government's pretty bitter that, a while ago, $2.5 billion equivalent left the country through Bitcoin because the citizens were taking their money out of the country. But if the government controlled the keys to that Bitcoin, I think it would be a smart move, at least strategically.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a really complicated game, especially with Iran, the US, geopolitical stuff going on here that is, it actually completely precedes, it supersedes everything that we've ever seen in compared with cryptocurrency because, like, the US and Iran have got quite a checkered past, let's be honest. And I think that Trump called the Iran deal the worst deal in history, and then he cancelled it. The one Obama set,
Uh-huh.
the one Obama signed. So ever since that, um, I think he just ripped up the agreement or cancelled it. I'm not entirely sure, and just put more sanctions on Iran. Ever since that moment, the tensions have definitely risen between the United States and Iran. And Iran has actually now said, this is why we're talking about it, that they're going to have a blockchain-based currency that's also backed to a hard asset, which is gold. So I would love to hear the opinion of someone like Peter Schiff, who's a complete gold bug and completely hates Bitcoin, doesn't think it's anything but greater fool fallacy. We discussed that last week.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about the fact that they're going to have some blockchain-based cryptocurrency as the national currency, or at least they're talking about it, that's backed up by gold?
Yeah, well, I mean, that would just be, I mean, that would kind of be what we used to have. The dollar used to be backed by gold. You can get old dollars at a antique store, and it says you can redeem this for a certain amount of gold. And I want to say the pound sterling, didn't that used to be redeemable in sterling silver?
Yeah, of course. Since Bretton Woods, when when we just basically went into an IOU debt-based system, hardcore, that's true. Uh, that it used to be the case that you could redeem currency for like something actually tangible, be it gold or silver or whatever
Yeah, yeah. So I
government
think
accepted.
I think this is an update of a thing we used to have, a while ago with the paper notes that are no longer backed by anything substantial. They used to be a certificate for gold or silver. So I kind of feel like we're going full circle. We're kind of going back to our roots, but adding crypto to it. So you're on the blockchain, you can transfer it globally, but you couldn't do that with a silver certificate and gold at your local bank. So I kind of think it's taking it full circle and taking it up a notch. And I think as long as whatever crypto is being backed by gold is audited, there's still the chance that, they could have a safe full of gold, but they can fractionally reserve that with crypto if you don't trust them or if they're not audited. So that's still going to be an issue.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I think then it becomes an issue of which cryptocurrencies would qualify to fall under that type of, you know, backed by gold type of asset, because some cryptocurrencies don't have, a max total supply. They are inflationary. They keep on that. There's no hard limit. Like Ethereum is an example of that. Ethereum is more like a, a computer rather than something that's limited. Whereas Bitcoin, it's got a certain amount of Bitcoin, 21 million Bitcoins in total will ever be produced. that's coded in from the start. I think that makes Bitcoin a good contender. But governments, they don't really know how to handle money these days that isn't inflationary, because people always need to be in debt in order to, keep the economy going. When you sign a mortgage, that means like a death, because mort is death, and it's just a death contract essentially. When you sign a mortgage for a new house, it's not like the bank gets the money out that they've been saving. It's your signature that actually creates the money, because they can use that signature, that contract, as a leverageable, tradable asset that you've agreed that you'll pay back this money, so they can create the money. It's very interesting how the money system works now. So I'm quite interested to see how it goes. If Iran tries it, that would be cool. It didn't really go down too well in Venezuela when the Venezuelan government tried to make their own cryptocurrency, the Petro, and that's because a lot of the banks are still private in Venezuela, and they just didn't accept them. So
Yeah, well, I mean, the Venezuelan government is in the running for the most incompetent government of the 21st century, so I'm not surprised their project didn't pan out.
yeah, I mean, when I was young, I used to think Venezuela, wow, what a place. That Hugo Chavez, he was trying to help the people by nationalizing the oil and trying to create hospitals and stuff. But as you become more mature and you finish high school, you actually start to realize that socialism doesn't really tend to work very well for most people. And the problem with socialism is it's a centralized system, and it's normally one person or a very small group of people that make a lot of the decisions. And that's what's great about cryptocurrencies, the fact that it's decentralized, that collectively people have control rather than individuals.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, socialism, it always works good short term, like 5 to 10 years. You print a lot of money and you use the reserves that were built up through capitalism, and all of a sudden you run out of money and wonder what happened. Oldest story in the book.
There's a
All right.
great YouTube video by a comedian, an English comedian called Alistair Williams, and it's called An Idiot's Guide to History, and he talks about how the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia and how it started, and how communism spread in Russia, and how it actually affected the economy. And he said he was only going to do like a 20-minute part on it, and he ended up rambling for about an hour and a half. But he did study it at length during his bachelor's degree, so he knows a lot of stuff about this subject. And it's just so sad to see how destructive it is when you've got centralized decision making, because they can never see the full economy. They can't even see the full scale of what's happening. And the sad thing is, in the last days of the Soviet Union, they used to just copy the prices from magazines in the United States. I think you had like catalogs where you could like look up stuff and order stuff, mail order catalogs in the United States.
Yeah.
Well, the Russian government just ended up copying the prices.
Yeah. Well, it's a funny thing. I heard, God, I can't even, maybe it was Gorbachev, one of the Russian old USSR premiers came to the US, and they kind of gave him a tour, and apparently he went into a grocery store and like he was blown away, and he thought the US government like made like an amazing grocery store to kind of for propaganda purposes. So they made him like drive to like they made the driver go to like 4 different grocery stores to make sure it wasn't like fake, because he couldn't believe like the amount of selection and how much there was in the grocery store. He was just shocked. So I thought that's a kind of a funny little side note. But should we
and just to make a recommendation is to look into Adam Curtis documentaries. They're really interesting. They use archive footage to explore different themes, and I think that he did a really good documentary about that.
Send me the link on that rant and this other guy, and we'll put it in the show notes for sure. Should
Oh
we
yeah, sure.
should
That's a
we
good
move
idea.
on?
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's hop in our crypto rocket and go from Iran to China because China, I always don't know what's happening there. I always feel like sometimes I feel like it's a crypto mecca, and then all of a sudden I feel like all of a sudden they can go and completely ban everything. But let's first I want to talk about mining because China is kind of like a mecca for mining, and this has been coming up in the news. Actually, it's been talked about for months, if not over a year, that the Chinese government is considering eliminating crypto mining in the country. And this is strange, given that China has been hosting the majority of the mining pools, and this would be a massive hit for China, but it would maybe be good for miners in other parts of the world. So it's just a proposal. So we don't want to FUD into it too hard, but if they ban mining, that's gonna maybe be good for the rest of the crypto world, but maybe not so good for China. I think they also produce a lot of miners and stuff like that. So what do you think about China and crypto mining?
Well, China is a massive market. I met a guy when I was in Hong Kong who is one of the biggest suppliers of mining rigs for the Chinese mainland, and he said that he has a massive demand, and he always has to update the very latest hardware every couple of months. So that was fascinating to hear. Now, when it comes to the Chinese government, who knows what they're going to do? I mean, that's the problem again with a kind of centralized government. It is going to be, at the behest of a few bureaucrats and technocrats in the Politburo style government that they have in China. I mean, I'm not really keen on getting too political on this podcast about China, but we all know that the Chinese government does oversee the economy, and they have a lot of pressure internally to keep on delivering like high numbers and high rate of growth in China. That's what keeps the people generally, placated and happy because they've had 30 years of like double-digit growth, and I think even though it's slowed down over the past 10 years, it's still like 6 to 8% growth a year, which is incredible. And some of the stuff that they do to keep the economy going is like building miles and miles and miles of railway and highways and roads and stuff.
Ghost cities that are empty.
Yeah, I mean, they do the ghost city thing, which is pretty bad because that's going to just be a massive bubble. That is a massive bubble, really, but the property bubble just keeps on inflating further in China. And the Chinese government, when it comes down to it, are they going to be really that happy about again this permissionless open system, which is Bitcoin cryptocurrency? I'm not so sure. They all have to get their heads together and decide like what they're going to do. I think China has banned Bitcoin or cryptocurrency several times already, and then kind of unbanned it in the future. There's not a lot they can do to prevent people from at least using it privately.
Yeah, well, if the government does go through and bans it, I think we're gonna see like, illegal black market underground mining warehouses, hidden in the mountains or, drawing off the grid secretly. I think you can try and ban it, but you're not gonna stop it. And that actually relates to what they've already done. And they're trying to ban like ICOs and cryptocurrency trading, and I believe they banned all the domestic exchanges, but they haven't stamped it out because there's still international exchanges and there's still foreign exchanges. So, do you think they can stop Chinese citizens from trading cryptocurrency with the way they can ban other websites, or is that going to be tough technologically for them?
I think it's tough technologically. I think that people that are inside China, they can control the internet fairly well, the Great Firewall of China. But a lot of the companies that are technically not Chinese are really Chinese. They are run by Chinese business people, and they just move to wherever there's a friendly jurisdiction. But in many cases, all the staff are in Shenzhen, which is right next to Hong Kong, but in the mainland of China, or they're in Shanghai. a lot of the companies that have like a public face in a friendly territory like Singapore or Malta will actually have most of their team still in the mainland because it's cheaper. They can control the workers a lot more stringently. They can basically get more output for a lower cost. And, you know, business culture is completely different there. Workers are more obedient. So I think it's quite interesting what's going on in China, really. We'll have to see because the US and China have got this trade war going on that seems to be like kind of halted a little bit, but I think that still it's ongoing with the tariffs that Trump has put on the Chinese, and the Chinese economy is quite heavily suffered because of that. And the Chinese have become a lot more nationalistic recently, and I know a lot of foreigners that live in China. So, like, maybe being an American person, if you're an American listening to this, calling someone a foreigner in Asia is a normal thing. It's like, oh, you're not a national of this country, you're a foreigner then. It's not a derogatory term. It's just a term that's used as a fact.
Yeah, when I lived in Korea, when I first was there, I'd always have little kids say to their parents, because I didn't live in Seoul, I lived in a suburb. It was 99.9% Korean. I'd always have little kids say, "Mom, Dad, look, there's a foreigner," and for them it's just normal. There's no really ill intent. It's just like, hey, look, there's someone that's not Korean.
Yeah, and it's especially true in China as well. It's even stronger. But the nationalism has got stronger since this. So there has been a trade war. The Chinese economy has suffered a little bit. So they've gotten a little bit more nationalistic, a little bit less friendly to the foreign community that is living in the mainland. Hong Kong, the problems going on there with, you know, the Chinese mainland saying that we're going to have this extradition of Hong Kong citizens to the mainland for trials. That was a very kind of slippery slope moment that a lot of Hong Kong people were like, we can see where this is going. If you can kind of subvert the system by saying, you can live in Hong Kong and you've got like a rule of law there, but we've got this special rule that we can, you know, extradite you to the mainland where everything else is different. I think that was a big watershed moment.
Yeah, that kind of ceases to make Hong Kong independent. And actually, tying back, I actually met some Venezuelan expats living in Hong Kong when I went to a couple of crypto meetups there. And they've been posting about it. I've been talking to them a little bit on social media, and apparently the protests in Hong Kong were huge, and hopefully they can kind of maintain a little bit of independence. I'd like to kind of go back to the China and trade thing. When you look at the trade flows and the trade imbalance, a trade war is going to hurt China way more than it's going to hurt the U.S., in my opinion. This is kind of getting more into economics and trade than crypto. But China needs the U.S. a lot more than the U.S. needs China. The U.S. really doesn't. It's pretty much self-sufficient in most ways, and other things they can get from other countries overseas. I think 50 countries have already left China. And I know that a lot of tech companies in the U.S. have been complaining about the way that China's been doing business. When Trump says they've been doing some shady things, they're definitely correct. The U.S. business community has been complaining for years that China is stealing their intellectual property, and they've been doing some kind of like strong arm tactics. You know, they're building technically innovative, sensitive things that U.S. companies developed. And basically they're saying, well, if you don't share this technology with you, we're not going to produce these products anymore. Or they can just see what they're doing and just steal this property. So intellectual property theft has been a huge issue with China. So I know some people don't like the trade war. Some people like it. Some people hate it. Some people love it. But a lot of U.S. companies are actually glad that someone's sticking up to China finally.
Well, yeah. The Chinese have had basically not a two-way street. They've been able to export their goods into the West, especially the United States, but they don't reciprocate. They basically put tariffs on American products coming into the local market, domestic market, so that's not the way that it should be done. It should be equal. And then you've got the issue of it's more of an economics thing than a crypto thing. But there's a really good channel on YouTube that I could recommend called Academic Agent. Now, he talks a lot about the UK and the EU, but some of this applies for the US and China, which is the US is the dominant player in that relationship. They do have the upper hand because basically most of the goods that China is sending to America are substitute goods. They are goods that America can either produce itself or they can source from elsewhere. It's not like they're completely dependent on China for these like low quality, cheap plastic mass-produced goods. They could essentially get them from anywhere else, really. So that's a big factor. It's a substitute good issue, which always favors the country that is sending their currency and receiving the substitute goods. It's always good to be the person or the party that's sending the currency. Very much like the UK and the EU. A lot of people say it's going to really be terrible when the UK leaves the European Union, and honestly, I have to disagree strongly because it's the substitute goods issue. We do trade with the European Union, but a lot of our trade is in things that we can source from elsewhere. If the European Union decides to get a little tricky with its trade tariffs with us, we can just buy our goods from elsewhere. It's not like California doesn't have nice wine. Australians have got lovely wine. Chile has got lovely wine. We don't have to buy the French stuff. Anyway, I digress. I don't want to have a whole topic on Brexit and the EU, but I'm quite bullish on the UK outside of the European Union. I'm looking forward to the UK being a small, nimble economy again that can make quick decisions. I'm not averse to it becoming like a Singapore of Europe. That would be cool. I don't think that will happen, though, because there are too many people that believe so strongly in the UK in this very socialistic way of doing things in Europe. They have a kind of a lack of understanding about the rest of the world. A lot of the people in the UK haven't actually gone beyond Europe, especially haven't been to Asia. And I think that the innovation that's going on in Asia in the cryptocurrency world is quite cool. And also some of the ways that the Asian countries like South Korea deal with certain problems, we could learn from these countries if we like take some of this knowledge that they've got in South Korea when it comes to building smart cities and things of that nature, which the UK, I'm in the UK now, I'm in a house at the moment that is like nearly 100 years old. It's a nice house, quite large, decent garden, but it doesn't have all of the smart home technology that the Korean apartments do. Anyway, that's a different topic, but that brings about smart cities. That's something that we could talk about.
Yeah, I'll just hop in on that. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I actually think our viewers might want to hear a little bit more, but maybe in a future episode. Yeah, I think, well, the one thing is if you're out of the EU, you're not bound by their laws. I know the US said they wanted to do bilateral trade. So if you're doing bilateral trade, you can negotiate. And if you're, good at negotiating, you can get the deals that you want. And yeah, someone will always fill the void if the EU is trying to strong arm them. And an easy example, I mean, I go to Switzerland, and last time I checked, they weren't in the EU, and they're doing okay.
Yeah, that's true, and neither is Norway, and they're doing fine too. So yeah, Switzerland's doing well, not in the EU. Norway also not in the EU, doing exceptionally well. And then we've got our buddies, the United States, that have basically said, look, we've got a trade deal ready to rock. We'd do a deal quickly. Obviously, there are some things that we'd have to negotiate on. But in general, I think it would be great to have a trade deal immediately on the table with the world's largest economy that shares the same language, has a very similar history. Let's say, well, you guys, our ancestors, essentially, that just decided not to pay taxes to the Queen.
Yeah, the student has become the teacher.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I think in the United Kingdom, there is. It's not quite there yet, but there is like undercurrent of people talking about the need for a codified constitution, more of a representative, elected upper house. So we still have a quite old-fashioned and traditional way of running the country, essentially. Now we do have a monarchy. We're a constitutional monarchy, but the constitution is not codified. That means it's not written down. It's just passed on through traditions, whereas the United States obviously has the constitution, which is written down. Everyone knows what it is. It's very clear.
First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, big ones right there.
Yeah. So I think that in the UK, people are starting to, think, what are we doing? It's the 21st century. We should have at least the opportunity to, elect an upper house, because we've got the House of Lords. Many of these people are hereditary peers. That means that they are born into these positions, which from an American perspective probably is insane, that someone can be born into a position and be unaccountable. Essentially, they can't really lose their privilege. Now, you do get appointed peers now, which Tony Blair brought in, which basically means that the government can pick some people that it likes to become new members of the Lords. Anyway, excuse me one moment. I'm going to mute my microphone because I'm about to sneeze. Wait a moment.
Okay, I'll ramble on a little bit. Josh, I had one question about this. Do you think the U.S. and the U.K. still have a special relationship from one American to one Brit? What do you think?
I think so, yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's absolutely there. The security services completely, especially when it comes to intelligence, they're very aligned when it comes to military stuff. The UK, in terms of expats, I think that most expats live in the United States, and we don't have like any special visa arrangements or anything like that. But 1.2 million Brits are actually living and working in the United States, whereas only 900,000 Brits are living in continental Europe. And most of those Brits in Europe are actually retirees living in, the south of Spain or the south of France or the south of Portugal, just spending their retirement money there in a better climate.
Wow, that's shocking. I had no idea that more people from the UK were living in the US than continental Europe. That's a little surprising to me.
Well, for me, it's not a surprise because we share the same language, which makes it easier to do business. And actually, most of the people that are in the United States are working. They're not like there as retirees, so it's a completely different dynamic. And then we've got a lot of Americans in London, especially in the city being the banking sector. So that's cool. I think
definitely. I've noticed when I'm in Boston and New York, I hear a lot of English and some Irish accents when I'm just walking around the city. So I definitely know there's quite a few here.
Yeah, and I think I'm looking forward to the future, really, when we can just be honest and say, look, America and the United Kingdom, with strong economies, we share a lot of things in common, share a common tongue. We have a very similar legal structure. We both have common law, which is very important. And I'm also looking to get the Australians and the Canadians involved in some kind of awesome foursome or whatever. The UK and US, along with Canada and Australia and New Zealand for that matter, could have like an epic amount of free trade between them. Reciprocal visa arrangements for workers, so because right now it's quite difficult for people to just get a visa in the United States. Now, obviously, if you're in one of the key sectors like banking, it's not so difficult. But if you just want to go over and work in the United States, and you could get a 2-year working holiday visa, but that type of work is very, it's not what you do as a career, so to speak. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to the future, man. I'm hoping that our two countries finally do the right thing and just think, look, it's going to be absolute burn for economies. A lot of Brits would go and work and set up businesses in the United States. A lot of good businesses that are not yet in the UK could set up franchises in the UK, American companies that is, or set up offices in the United Kingdom. United Kingdom is the 5th largest economy in the world, but it's only got 65 to 70 million people. So it's a pretty strong economy. I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah, the visa stuff is always difficult. You know, whether you're going to Asia or Europeans to America, America to Asia, or whatever. It's we don't have the free movement that we used to have. But should we move on to a different topic?
Yeah, man. Have you
All
got
right.
any other topics?
Yeah, I got a question. I got a question for you, Josh. I'm kind of a newbie when it comes to crypto. So you were talking earlier about smart cities. So I'm guessing smart cities are just cities with a lot of smart people in them. Is that correct?
I think you know better than that. So a smart city is a city that is built with technology being at the forefront of its design. So that includes like the plumbing system, all of the sanitation. It comes to the energy production and energy saving. It comes to like just being an efficient city, essentially. So South Korea is a leading part of the world for these types of research and innovation. They have built a smart city already. It's called Songdo. Songdo is a beautiful new city, which is it's actually on the way towards Incheon Airport. Now, Incheon Airport is a beautiful airport. I was there just a few days ago before I flew to the United Kingdom, and it was totally empty because I took a red-eye flight because my son is, he's young, so it's much better for him to be asleep on that long journey. But the airport itself is just immaculate, so clean, so nice. But on the way to that airport, I was driving, and you have to drive just not through Songdo, but just right by Songdo. So on the highway, you can see really nice buildings that they've built and really well-developed new apartment blocks and things like that. And there's a good documentary. I think you can on YouTube if you just search for Songdo, SONG. DO, South Korea Smart City, you'll be able to find a couple of videos, I'm pretty sure. Now, what that means is that you can, from your home, you'll have like a smart home panel, and you can set the temperature in different rooms. You can call different apartments in the city. You can basically call the security guard. Now, I've got that in my apartment. Actually, the other day, I accidentally pressed the alarm by mistake instead of opening the front door because I was having something delivered, and I just pressed the alarm instead. So this the security guy came over and he was like, "Is everything okay?" I was like, "I know it's fine." Anyway, so smart cities are a very hot topic in South Korea. One of the big things that people like to invest their money in is apartments in South Korea. It was a bit of a bonanza during the Park Geun-hye presidency because she had much more lenient rules in terms of the amount of down payment that you needed in order to secure an apartment or a property. Now, most of the properties in South Korea are apartments because they have a limited amount of space. About 70% of the land is covered in, it's mountainous, so it's not really very easy to build. So the limited space that they do have that isn't used for farming, they are very creative when it comes to using the space, and much of Incheon, in fact, including the airport, is reclaimed land from the sea. So they've reclaimed the land from the sea to create the Incheon airport area, and a lot of this new smart cities development is on reclaimed land from the sea. So they've basically added more soil to the seabed and diverted the flow of the water away from where they want to build these cities, and it's pretty awesome. So I don't know if I can share fully, but I've been involved with a couple of smart city projects in South Korea at the pitching phase and the development phase. The South Korean government has earmarked about $1 billion. I think it's $880 million for blockchain research, and much of that is in the smart city area. So There's a place in Changwon, which is near Soraksan, which is near Sorano, where the Olympics were in the 2000. I think it's 2016 or 2000. When was the Winter Olympics in South Korea? 2016, I think.
Yeah.
Pyeongchang. Well, near there, they've also reclaimed a bunch of land that's going to be used for smart cities, and now blockchain companies are bidding for the right to, be part of this smart city project, and that would mean that this city will be set up so that lots of things that happen within the city infrastructure can be recorded in in a blockchain, so it can be easily verified in the future. So that's pretty cool. I think that's
Yeah,
interesting.
that's pretty interesting. I think there's definitely a strong convenience factor, but sometimes I'm a little hesitant when it comes to smart cities. I think of China with their social credit score. I think, in some places, some countries, that could turn into a dystopian nightmare where everything's on the blockchain, everything's being recorded. I think a lot of Americans would be hesitant to go full in on a smart city that's kind of watching your every move. But I'm kind of curious how they would marry that convenience and that efficiency with privacy. Or is there much concern about privacy in South Korea?
Yeah, they are really concerned about privacy. I mean, if you look on Korean TV channels, even on the news, unless the person gives express consent to be featured on the news, then their faces have to be blurred. So you'll often see people being interviewed with a blurred face and their voice has been changed, even just for common stuff, like not that they've been accused of any crimes or stuff, just like people's opinions on the talk shows and stuff. They will change people's voices, they will black out people's faces. They've got interesting laws in South Korea about, truthful slander laws, which is pretty unique, where even if something is an objective fact, if it can bring damages to that person, then that person can sue. So, or that company can sue. So it's quite interesting. They are very concerned about privacy. There's a lot of phishing scams though in South Korea. Phishing being PH, not F, obviously, and voice phishing it's called, where essentially people are trying to scam unwitting, naive or old people, I guess, and take their finances. Anyway, I don't want to get too much involved in that. I don't really know much about the fishing industry in South Korea, but I often see announcements on the TV about being wary about it, especially in the cryptocurrency websites. Like if you look on Corebit or Upbit, they often have a warning pop-up about, be wary of phishing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, awesome. Yeah, that's interesting to hear how blockchain's getting integrated in these smart cities. And yeah, do you want to leave it there, Josh, or do you have anything else you want to say today?
Actually, that was a decent episode. I think I don't know how long we ran for, but I think we managed to talk about a bunch of interesting topics that are pretty, newsworthy or relevant for the current time. It's the 19th of July when we're recording this. It probably will be published in about, 4 or 5 days. So it'll still be relevant. And let's see how this dates in the future, our predictions and some of the stuff we've discussed. We can come back and maybe let's review what happens in Iran in a couple of months. We can see how that's gone. We can look at the banks that we talked about, like Revolut and N26 and TransferWise, how much they go into the crypto space, how crypto.com develops and how it spreads. And it's going to be fascinating to follow these stories and see how they turn out, right?
Yeah, definitely. In addition to doing, our deep dives into certain topics or interviews, yeah, maybe we can do like a monthly crypto and review or weekly crypto and review show. But I guess that'll wrap it up for us today. So until next week, Josh, I'll see you next week on the dark side of the HODL Moon.
All right, mate. I'll see you next time.
Cheers.
HODL Moon!